minutes for it to... And then I close it. Well, good morning, everyone. Very pleased this morning to have our friend and colleague, Daniela Ibarra-Howell with us, and from the Savory Institute. I'm just going to stop that echo because I've got another thing going on there. So Daniela is the CEO and co-founder of the Savory Institute, and we're really stoked to have her with us today. Welcome, Daniela.
Thank you, Darren, very much.
So you're in Boulder in Colorado at the moment?
Boulder, Colorado is where the headquarters are, yes.
And enjoyed the winter?
We had a very dry one, but so it's okay for me. I'm a fair weather person, but we're needing more moisture.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
We'll have it in the spring.
So your journey to this place as a CEO of a pretty big organization has been an interesting one. You've started off in Argentina. Did you start off on the land at all, or did you be a city person, or how did you go there?
I was a city girl, born and raised in Buenos Aires with grandparents that were farmers in Italy. Mm-hmm. And then they came to Argentina during the war, and some of them became businessmen in Buenos Aires, and some of them were farmers. But my parents were not in agriculture, but we had a lot of cousins and such, and I always loved going to the countryside and loved the idea of being a cowgirl. And, you know, the big valley was showing in black and white at that time in Argentina. And oh, it was so awesome. And always a desire for some reason, you know, all of us have it when we're kids, some sort of a dream, and mine was to go to Africa. And so I had to figure out how to get out of Argentina and go to Africa. That was meaningful. And so when the time came to select a career, I decided to study agronomy, agricultural sciences, which at that time, 5% of were women, 5% of the student body were women. So very male dominated. The countryside in Argentina, very, very male dominated. Women were supposed to be in the kitchen cooking, raising kids, which is great. Especially the raising kids is fun. I'm not sure about the cooking. Prefer Jim to cook for me. But I made it. I went to the university. By the time I left, 5 years later, probably close to 30% were women. So that was good to see an increase. But as soon as I came out and had a great opportunity to do some project planning for an estancia, a ranch in Argentina, they accepted it, really great, but now we're going to find a man to manage the place. So I knew then that one was not going to work, and I went to the Ministry of Agriculture and had a tremendous love for natural resources. That was my core, what I spent the last 2 years during my school time studying was desertification, the land degradation that we were seeing happening in Patagonia and the west of my country, and the fact that there were no solutions for that. And that was quite daunting, and spent lots of time on the land and realizing that we were not doing things right. And it was not just the rancher there, it was just government and policy, and from a scientific point of view, ecological point of view, financial point of view, we were not aligning things to bring solutions to these issues. So after being there and working on desertification later on at the Ministry of Agriculture in Argentina for another 3-4 years, I realized, that the answers are not here. I need to go out and find more. And so I applied for scholarships all over the world. It was the time of the Gulf War, and I had applied to Egypt and to a program there, and I was happy it didn't happen. But I was accepted at Lincoln University in New Zealand. Oh. Went there for a couple of years to do my master's and met Jim, my husband, there. And as he learned about what I was trying to do, he gave me as a gift a book that he had found in a library in Gunnison, Colorado, near his ranch. And he said, I think you will enjoy this book. And it was Alan Savory's holistic management book. And that really opened a lot of... so
that would have been the first edition, Holistic Resource Management?
It was Holistic Resource Management, the first version by Alan Savory. It was an old copy that was in the Gunnison Library, yes. And it brought a lot of the, the insights that I was seeking. So finished my master's there, went traveled the world, and finally met back again with Jim in the United States, and we decided to get married. So at that time, we said, what do we do? And I said, well, if we could do anything, why don't we write to this man, the author of this great book, and see if we can learn more from him. In the meantime, a lot of really good work was done in New Zealand on the Tassoc grasslands and trying to incorporate some of these insights into that. And but the real journey began when I got married and moved to the United States and started working side by side with Alan Savory in 1994. So that was a lifetime ago. Long time. Yeah.
Wow, that's so, and everything's just followed on from there. Your friendship with Alan and Jody, and your work with your husband.
Yes, and we worked very closly with my husband. And when we got married, we wrote to Alan and the organization at that time, the Holistic, which is now Holistic Management International, continues to exist. And they were looking for managers for the first learning site, which was a big ranch in New Mexico, between New Mexico and Arizona, the High Lonesome Ranch. That tells you where I was from after being, a city girl. I was in the middle of nowhere, but it was fantastic. And it was during 2 years of huge drought, but tested our skills really and this whole holistic management approach and our ability to navigate those 2 years with, success or with some level of success, if you want to call it.
So you got through, which is the most.
We didn't have the stock like all the neighbors were doing. The land bounced back as soon as we got some moisture. It was great. So we thought this has been such a hard school of hard knocks, as you would say, that we can do this anywhere, right? So we decided, and during those 2 years, we worked very closely with Alan and the program for educators, accredited certified educators of the organization was beginning. So I had the great opportunity to study with a very small group of folks, including Bruce Ward and Brian Marshall, who are the two that have brought holistic management in Australia. And just a couple more, and Alan Savory teaching the whole thing and spending time understanding all these issues was wonderful. And then working with Alan as a mentor at the High Lonesome. And after those 2 years, which was our contract, we said we had enough of the desert, and we went to Africa for my graduation from these with all this little group of new educators. And we went to Dimangombe, which is the ranch, the Savory, the Africa Center for Holistic Management, where Alan himself lives half of the year. And it was just fantastic. It was great. It was, heart warming and eye-opening. And there was no getting back from there, those 2 years and that trip. And then a lot of holistic managers were in Africa, in Namibia, in South Africa, Dick Richardson in Namibia, Giro in others, and Kenya. And so we took time and traveled and learned from all this amazing community of people that had been doing it for a long time. And when we came back to the US, we decided we were ready to take on the management of the family ranch in Western Colorado. And so in 2017, I think it was, we took over the management of Zero and Blue, which were our two ranches in Colorado, and lived there and raised our kids there until 8 years ago when we moved to Boulder. So, and at that point, many things had happened to the organization that Alan Savory had founded. And it was time to just start afresh, create our future, move forward. Our vision had evolved on what needed to happen. And we said, let's make it happen. And we founded the Savory Institute, really as a for-profit entity. And that would have an educational arm or a consulting arm, and it would have a management arm. The management arm, we went on to pitch to investors to acquire land and livestock, and we would take over long-term management for triple bottom line returns, or social and ecological and financial. And that was very easy to pitch. The consulting side, the education side was not that investable. Mm-hmm. So at that point, some of our investors said, but we will fund it, we will fund the beginning of it, we will seed fund it if you become a non-for-profit. And against, Alan's desire to deal with a non-for-profit again, we said, let's do it because we can leverage so many more resources. So much of the work we do is really not necessarily a for-profit initiative or enterprise. And so we can accelerate it, tapping onto philanthropic funds. But we committed deeply to maintaining an entrepreneurial spirit, making sure that the underlying business model of any initiative that we took were really solid, that we were not just burning money like, happens in many non-for-profit organizations, that we were going to put money to work to create self-sustaining opportunities for people on the land. And ourselves as an organization committed to staying small and nimble and entrepreneurial, and just being one node in a network with specific functions that we do, that we cover, while others are doing their own thing, but we're working together as a whole. Yeah. So it's been fun, and after a year or so, I was offered to lead this organization, and I, we co-founded it, and then I was offered to lead it, and I said, okay, as long as my kids can continue to be my number one priority, that it doesn't get too crazy, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. So that's how I got where I am.
Good on you. Well, that's an amazing story. So you, as with your working week with your kids, how do you manage? Well, how old are your kids now?
So now Mia is 11 and Savannah is 17. Right. So they are, a teenager. They require a lot of time. A kid requires a lot of time. But it's part of the decision-making framework. It's part of that quality of life. It's part of designing your life, your work, and everything in a way that is regenerative. And we're doing the same at the Savory level, at the organizational level. And we said, well, organizations are battling to keep employee engagement and meaning and happiness. How can, and we were thinking, if we're now building a movement, we're not building it, we're together building a movement, and working with so many of our hubs, and we can talk about that, but so many partners around the world. How do we not become the bottleneck to the creativity and the entrepreneurial spirit and the things that contextually only they know how to take forward? And how do we become always a resource? But the DNA of the things we know work doesn't get corrupted in the process. Yeah. So that balance between protecting the core that we know is important to protect, but allowing for that, creativity and innovation and entrepreneurial spirit to take it to where it can be. And so we say, well, the best way to start understanding how that works in organizations is to maybe prototype it at home at the Savory Institute. So we have a team of around 13 people. And how do we all can bring the best that we have in a way that is regenerative, that it actually provides us with well-being as individuals with a purpose and passions and skills, that is aligned with where we want this organization to go and what we want us to do. But then we have that flexibility and that ability, that accountability, that autonomy, and that interconnectedness. The same things we want to see in our network.
Yeah.
So we said, well, if abundance, and this is the work we've been doing with my colleague and friend Trey Cates for many years now, but if abundance is the outcome of the underlying health of a system, rather than just being focused on outcomes, and goals and what we need to do, a little bit more like the industrial model of output and volume and efficiencies. What are the underlying conditions need to be for that to happen as an outcome, as an outcome of the way we operate and how people are thriving and are doing the things they are doing and are accomplishing their own purpose in life. So it's been an amazing journey with our team, and very guided by our holistic context. Strong planning, high level of accountability, and leading and lagging indicators of our own, outcomes. Sort of like we look at the land, we look at our organization.
Yeah.
So it's been fantastic. So part of it is bringing into balance our personal lives and weaving our personal lives into our life, at work. So we keep that balance. So it's been good. We've been able to handle the kids and the relationships with all the ups and downs that humans face. But
sure.
Yeah, but with that certainty that we're very intentional about managing all those things that are important for each one of us.
Yeah, intent's such a big thing, isn't it? And so, and I talk a lot about intent in the way that we walk around, in the way that we talk, in the way that we stand, just in what you're looking at. You as that young woman leaving BA all those years ago was looking at the world in one way, and now you look at it in a different way. And even when you go on a landscape, you look at it in a different way. When you walk into an office scene that's not your own, I'm sure you go in there and go, okay, and and that I suppose would be really great for you to see when people come to you and see the way your organization is working. Are people saying, because a lot of people obviously look at holistic management and they think grazing. I mean, it's, if you look at the word associations, they think it's a grazing system, but I mean, clearly it's not. But there aren't many organizations outside of agricultural organizations that have taken holistic management on as their guiding framework for decision making and operating. And how are you with people coming in and seeing the way? Are you at that level where people are? Because you're in a pretty dynamic place in Boulder, which is, it's a
ripe for that type of thing.
It's right. I would have thought it's right for that sort of thing. So how's that going?
I think there are many things that are making the timing ripe for holistic management to be finally embraced as what it is, this framework that allows us to make better decisions, to align actions, to design policy, things that are beyond just the grazing piece. But you're right, and it is still the case that holistic management is associated mainly with grazing and grasslands and livestock. And when we founded the Savory Institute and we brought talent to help us even decide, are we everything to everybody and nothing to everybody? Or do we become really sharp in penetrating the space and then we open up the other component as people become ready for those? And that was, the latter was what we decided to do. So we said, let's stay with grasslands, and not only because it was our core competency tied to the holistic plant grazing component was, but also because of the promise of grasslands that they pose to become a contributor to the solutions that we're seeking now tied to climate change and food and water security globally. So we thought, let's stay with it. Let's reposition grasslands as something a little bit more, or let's work towards that, try to be a little bit more sexy, a little bit more charismatic, just like forests or, charismatic wildlife are. How do we put some soul to these grasslands that people basically, even, in Colorado, 75% of our land is rangeland. We don't talk about it. We talk about sustainable agriculture in the context of small farms, sort of garden, cropland, sustainable cropland agriculture, but the water catchments, the whole sponge that is making everything else work, it's not working. And so we need to, let's focus on that. Let's bring livestock as the tool. And then as we enter that way, then we can start expanding. Well, when we then decided to scale via replication, contextually relevant replication of what would, place-based efforts, and that was our hub strategy, rather than try to do everything from Boulder and go to Kenya and tell the Maasai what to do, which is not what we should do, is let's partner with leaders and entrepreneurs and people that are also have this amazing passion for solving these issues, and that holistic management makes sense to them. It was a pull strategy, never a push strategy, and let's partner. And let's equip them with a lot of things we already have, curriculum and whatnot, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's create some consistency, so then in this consistent language and training, we have a bigger voice, a more unified voice. And let's distribute this effort, and then let's see where it gets. And so these started working, and we have amazing and very diverse partners around the world that are leading these movements in their own region, in their own context, very uniquely, suited. So for their own, what they know what to do or what not to do, and some of them are having more impact than others, and we're all in a learning curve, but we're all supporting each other at the same time. So when we start looking at it from a more systems thinking approach and design approach, and we're seeing the underlying in common denominator type of challenges that we're facing that are tied to maybe policy design or constraints or market constraints or human behavior constraints, then we realize that we need to move into that larger aspect of holistic management. And I think we're getting there. And that coming together with the, more awareness and acceptance of what's happening to our climate and the connection with violence, migrations, and poverty, and all other, important issues. I think the whole space is ready and ripe to embrace and move beyond the livestock raising focus that we have had in the past.
Even though holistic as a word is starting to become the new sustainable, and just as I hear politicians, at least here in Australia, using the word holistic a bit too much for my liking. I remember really well Alan sitting down with Joel Salatin and I at his ranch at Polyphase Farm just before we went to the London conference altogether, and of the Savory Institute, your inaugural conference, which is where we met. And Alan sat us down. I think it was 7 o'clock in the morning at the haystack, and we've recorded this. We haven't released it yet, but I should. And told us a story, which I'm sure he's told you, about how a lot of us are not at the table, and there's a lot of different factions, if you like, within any movement. There's a lot of different organizations, etc. But because they're not necessarily talking to each other, they're not necessarily coordinated, it makes it very difficult to have a seat at the policy table. And he put forward the premise that that if you are there, then the first question to ask everyone, which is sort of like the next step on beyond this the conflict resolution stuff that people used to ask, you know, what's the worst possible outcome of this decision? What's the best possible outcome? Well, the next question from that, which Alan revealed, was, can we all agree that management should be holistic? And it was it's a question that's almost immutable. It's a very difficult question for someone, once they understand what it actually means, to disagree with, I would have thought. And is that something that you've carried on in the way that you're working? Are you trying to give a greater emphasis to the words that you're using? Because words are very powerful, as you know, and there's a lot of words in holistic management. There's a lot of terms. There's a lot of, it's a framework. And so clarity on all of that is something that you all must work pretty close. I mean, I look at, quick plug, I look at this book here, and version number 3, and semantically it's changed, which I told Alan and Jody. I mean, it's this book. That's why I asked you about holistic resource management. I remember the first time I pulled that out, I went, this book isn't really easy to read. It's this one here, though. The last one was really good, but this one really does a great job of I won't say mainstreaming holistic management, but I will at the same time. It certainly makes, like, I could give this to anybody from any walk of life, and it would be an attractive book for them to read. And it brings a lot more to it brings a lot more to the whole framework.
Yes, Darren. We were very intentional in trying to do that without watering down, without corrupting that DNA, because that is a lot of knowledge.
That was really interesting for me. The first few pages, I'm going, oh, what have they done? They've made it like, well, for people who've read a lot of this stuff, like me, I'm a professional in this field. I read this stuff. It's my daily bread. To open this, and I went, oh no, they've made it so I'm not going to be able to read it. But then once I got into it, I said, look, give myself time, read a few pages ahead. Oh, okay, everything's okay. I thought that the user friendliness of it had probably, I won't say gone too far, but it certainly, initially, that's what I thought. That was my first reaction. But then I went into it and I went, oh, this is actually easier to read and easier to get.
And it's a fine balance, because
it is.
Those of us that have been involved in much, in a longer time, we tend to just protect and hold those, things that to us, it's so important to understand these things. But then as we evolve, and we have to be prepared to be open and evolve and talk to younger people and talk to people in other walks of life, not just rangeland ecologists or things like that. And I think one great lesson happened with the TED Talk that Alan gave. And when he had to make it shorter and more understandable, and Chris Anderson, the curator of TED, would not let him say anything that only he or a group of us would understand, because we've been hearing for 20 years, but meant nothing to the public there. So everything had to be said in a way that was still the real thing, but it was understandable. It could connect in the heart and not only the head. And then we went through the process of writing the ebook for TED.
Yeah.
And we were working with fact checkers, and that was another amazing opportunity. What do you want to say here? Why are you so complicated, and things so in a way that is so unappealing? And these were writers, and they were, completely outside of our space. So it could give us tremendous amount of insights into how to say the same thing in a way that could resonate with more people. Yeah. And those of us who then wanted to go more into the technical details could do so. But otherwise, we've been intentional about that. But Jody, Alan's wife, is our chief curator. So she makes sure that we don't go to where you were afraid we had gone, and that we don't, we don't cross that line.
Yeah. No, well, you did really, really well. It's a great piece. So I wanted to talk a little bit about research, and because that was one of the big things, I suppose, that Alan put himself right out there on a limb doing the TED Talk. I look at it in two ways. One, it was a great pitch of a man who's been in the departure lounge for longer than anyone really should. I think he's like that. I think he's like that guy that's stuck in the airport on that movie. It was Tom Hanks.
We have a saying in Argentina: "Yerba mala nunca muere." A bad weed never dies.
So
that's for a long time.
So you've got this man who's done an amazing amount of work over his whole life. I mean, lived a life that some people will only live moments of, and comes to this point where you're on a really big global stage, and you put it out there, and at once you get a lot of praise for it, and then on the other side you get belted from arsehole to breakfast time, as we would say here. You know, you really got a hard time out of that. So, and the evidence stream that comes with that, I mean, there's been a lot of articles, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, you're at the forefront of it, but for a lot of listeners out there, they may not have seen, but there's a lot of articles out there that have been against holistic management, or against the grazing, I should say. I won't say holistic management because clearly they haven't got that. How are you running with that, and how's the evidence being built now that you've got this hub network? Because the way I've looked at it a few times is, wow, you've got this amazing network. You've got some pretty common tools, even back in the old days before the Savory Institute. You've got some pretty common monitoring tools. If everyone's doing holistic management, financial planning, if everyone's doing monitoring, all of that, you should have a pretty amazing base that will be empirical, but I mean, a pretty big study. So how are you going with that?
We're going good. And this is what happens when we exactly what you said now is what we thought when we founded it. So let's go and find all the data. We know holistic managers do their monitoring because that informs management. It's intrinsic, it's core we do, right? So we should have that data. And the data was somewhere there on the shelves, and you know, it was being used somehow, but it was just so painful to be able to compile anything. And then on the other side, and we know it's there and it's of value, we looked into what are all the evidence we have and start sort of like qualifying evidence. You know, it was called anecdotal. Well, what does it mean anecdotal versus, you know, scientifically sound? So we started talking about, you know, there's a lot of storytelling that is backed by photography and by, you know, the ranchers' deep knowledge of what happened on their land. That is very, very credible and awesome, but it's not a peer-reviewed paper. And there are peer-reviewed papers that suck. They don't say anything that really could advance ever the space because they were designed poorly. And then there's the stories that are flawed and they don't have anything behind. And there's the good peer-reviewed papers that can add value to the movement. So we said we have the science, the scientific peer-reviewed paper. We have evidence in the form of photography or storytelling. We have all these different, we have some of the data that comes from monitoring by ranchers. We have articles, we have all kinds of things that we can compile. Let's compile it. So we went to work, and for the following like 3-4 years, and still now, we consolidated what was in the space about holistic management and also the science of that backs the practice of holistic management, because holistic management can be studied as a whole, or the underlying principles tied to, you know, soil health and water infiltration and retention. I mean, that science is already, you know, it's inarguable. So, and it's part of what, but specifically in terms of livestock and the management of livestock and the impact of the management of livestock on ecosystem health, we didn't have much actual robust peer-reviewed papers. So we said, well, this is an opportunity to start looking rather than at replicating stocking rate, stocking rates or stock density type of experiments in 1 acre, 2 acres, is look at our hub demonstration sites around the world as canvases for researchers to go and gather information and look at it. So looking really at all the variables moving at the same time and being managed by the rancher, what are the outcomes, rather than trying to keep all the variables fixed really and moving one, which is not reality, it's not what happens on a ranch that is holistically managed. And so at the leadership, one of the, our biggest, allies have been Pablo Borelli in Patagonia with their producer network, and Jason Roundtree in Michigan State, one of our hubs there that have also done that, and a lot of folks, amazing folks doing research in Australia. So little by little, we started Richard Teague working in Texas, and now with the work that he's doing with Peter Big and that group. So now we used holistic management practitioners as the lab, and then those researchers get closer to the land, understand the incredible complexity and how this is continuously dynamic. We cannot fix anything. And then we study those correlations. And now we're starting to have more and more peer-reviewed papers come out that brings more credibility to the claims we make around holistic management. Parallel, we continue to capture story and capture, these other types of evidence that still are very important for us.
Because you're pitching to two different groups here. Is that the purpose? I mean, you've got one who will be the ag science crowd, the agronomy, your own people, in terms of you, and also policymakers, etc., who all need this evidence trail. But then on the other side of that, you've also got a different kind of evidence, which is going to the graziers, pastoralists, farmers themselves, who are interested in a farmer-to-farmer story in exchange often. They want the data, they want that to be right, but they also are interested in the story. Is that part of it?
Darren, I think they're all interested in the story. Without the story, the data doesn't move much. Even policymakers were sitting there in Lancaster with the Prince and Andrea Liu and all these policymakers, and what moves is a story.
Sure.
What they want to know is the data is behind it.
Yeah.
Now you can present, it's so funny, sometimes you can present them this amount of evidence, they will never go through it. You can put numbers and they said, okay, there's data behind it. It's like these, okay, we know we're not lying, that this is true, that the science is behind it. So they, it's like layers of knowing.
Yeah.
And then there's the ones that are there, and very few on the ones that were vocal during the TED talk, which are the ones that they exist to be anti-livestock. I mean, that's their passion, that's what they believe, that's their paradigm. No matter how much data or science you present them, they will kill it, and they will figure out how to say, no, this is wrong and this is right. And so those are not as many, and they are the ones that are using, the same
stuff. Yeah,
so the same stuff that continues to build on. But even with the TED talk, when we looked at Andrea that was working with us at the time, she looked at all the input, and really less than 6% was negative, but it was so vocal and so loud, distracted from all the positive stuff. But we said, do we engage in every one of these negative things or do we continue to create our own future, continue to create the positive examples and the positive science and data that maybe will shape public opinion? And once public opinion shifts, then policy will shift, and then market incentives will shift.
Yeah. Well,
so that's what we do, because it's a lot more fun, right? Than fighting George Monbiot's of the world. Yeah.
Oh, he's an easy fight anyway. He did write to me privately, but I'll, because I said to him, you need to do your job a bit better, basically, as a journalist, because he's a well-respected journalist, but he's found himself oscillating an enormous amount, and I found that something that he needed to be pulled up on, and he wrote to me privately and agreed. But because it was private, I kept it at that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, great. Thank you, Darren.
Just on this thread of, it is the negative, but we've got films out there, and there's an emerging plant eating narrative that's going out there, and it's not for livestock to eat those plants, it's for humans to eat those plants in between the livestock. So I looked at, as you know, we made the film Polyfaces, and we were very, very proud of that work. My wife and our eldest daughter did a beautiful job with it, and it did exactly what we wanted. It sold that why story that you're talking about. We didn't need to, the data on Polyface Farm is all there. If you want to know about how much they make and how much, all of that, it's all there. But we really wanted to make a story about them and what's going on and the human part of it. And I think we did that quite well. At the same time as we released that, another film came out called Cowspiracy. And there was a lot of noise around it, and it had a few friends who were in it, Doniger and Eric Markegard and people like that. I think Alan was in it as well, and a few other of the usual talking heads that you pull together. And my wife said to me, "You're not going to go and watch that, are you?" I said, "Look, Lee, you've got to watch everything. I want to see what's going on." So I watched it, and I was really interested to see the way they'd constructed the narrative and built the film. Making a film, I mean, I had a fairly peripheral involvement with Polyfaces, but it's quite a thing. I mean, we didn't.
Oh my goodness, yes.
We kind of found that out in the end, 4 years later. But we just been through an incredibly intensive post-production phase, which was actually the biggest part of the project, doing all of the sound editing and all of the color grading and just all of those little nuances that go into making a film not look like a home movie. And then Cowspiracy came out. So I was very fresh in that space, and then watched that film as if it was our own film and looked at it through that lens. And I thought it was incredibly powerful. I thought, gee, it really goes through to, like, as a piece that does a great job of converting people, if that's what its job was to turn people from being omnivores into herbivores, then it was really successful at that, and it seems to have been so. And that sort of carried on in the narrative. I've seen a shift in a lot of the narratives now where, like, for example, PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals.
Yes.
And I look at, we have an organisation here in Australia called Animals Australia. And Animals Australia, I don't know, this is not the guide for everything, but Animals Australia has 1.6 million likes on Facebook. For an Australian-based organisation of we're 23 million people. So it's a percentage of our population. It's about 2 million people in total follow them. And just a couple of nights ago, they sponsored a thing on live export of sheep. Years ago, they sponsored some hidden videos on some mistreatment of cattle in Australian exported cattle in Indonesia. And that shut down the Australian live export trade overnight. So, but it's led by a very demure former detective who doesn't look like a vegan radical, doesn't even use those terms. And it's very, very sophisticated. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, people can do whatever they like, but I'm interested in your take on I won't say combating the propaganda, but there is a particular paradigm that's going out there, and there's a particular view that's carrying on, and you're saying you're not focusing on that or not reacting to it, but surely you must look at it and go, okay, well, what can we learn? And if so, what are the things that you're learning that you can do yourselves to do better?
Wow. Well, yes, we were personally impacted by both Cowspiracy, PETA with our hub in Patagonia also. They went in there, filmed shearing, and again portrayed and like they can do in film, you know, put it in a way that even I would say, oh my goodness, that's horrible, right? And they know how to do that. And they are driven by deep belief in their own paradigm and limited information, like all of us are. And the realm of, to me, is somehow funny to watch, but the realm of, you know, anti-livestock or anti-oil, and all those things are, you know, are coming from a paradigm of understanding a piece. And if you look at CAFOs and, you know, the feedlot and the suffering of the animals and what it's doing for the environment, that piece, it can put off anybody. But if you don't understand the role of herbivores in the larger scheme of things for the health of the planet, then you're really missing out. If you look at methane as a flow from the cow to the atmosphere, is a problem, is a liability. If you see it as part of the carbon cycle that you need to really work in balance with, it's just what happens. It comes out of mangroves and forests and wetlands, and we cannot get rid of everything that produces methane because that's life, right?
Rice paddies.
Did you say that again?
I said rice paddies.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, everything. And Archibald Station in Florida, close to one of our projects, the Bluehead, they are measuring that. And so they realized in the process of measuring methane that their mangroves or their wetlands, mangroves, I think we're putting more methane. I said, what are we going to do now? It's not, that makes it wrong? No, because it's part of a cycle. And until we as people understand those things better, we cannot form an opinion, and it's easy to convince us, especially when you bring the more emotional side of us, you know, of animal suffering and all those things. And even, you know, we're working a lot with, for example, fashion folks trying to clean their supply chains for leather and wool, and they are, I mean, it's very highly polluted, polluting the whole industry. And they are trying to see, so wool is really nothing compared to the impact of plastics and you know, polyesters and all those things on ocean life. But we're not looking in the eyes of the fish or, you know, the coral. And so it's only when something is either big enough or touch us in some way more closely that we become aware, and then we understand and believe the part of the story that we're told. And as Alan is saying more often now, we cannot say that resources are a problem. You know, resources are resources, and the problem can become the problem or the opportunities, how we manage those resources. So we go back to management and decision making. So livestock are a resource, a tool. Oil is a resource, is the way we manage and use oil that is bringing these consequences. We still drive, we still go on planes, we still turn on the lights. I mean, even PETA folks that are, you know, have that such impact are wearing clothes that have tremendous impact on animal life, but we don't know because we don't know enough. It's so complex, right? So I think what we need to do is first give more. You know, yes, there will be always the conspiracies and the PETAs, and maybe they exist because they need to put some sort of a balance in the pendulum for the ones that really are doing the wrong things on the other side. But we need to bring it more to that center in which we're, as consumers, more informed and aware and connected. We have become so, as consumers or as public somehow, we become so disengaged from the natural world, you know, and we don't understand it anymore. So there's a process of education that needs to happen, so then we can make not just emotional moves, but more informed, deeper informed moves. And I think it's very important that for filmmakers and those who run activist groups or such, to they themselves be, and us as also trying to educate our public, be on a deep commitment to understanding and continuing to understand and learn the complexity of our natural and social human world. Because if we think we have it all sorted out and we package it and we start pushing it, then we're missing out, because that's only our paradigm. But it will be very important that we somehow begin building bridges with these movements, with the PETAs, the people that are concerned for the animals, the vegans that are concerned for the impact of animals on the land or for their own diets, and then bring more knowledge, more, the research or more evidence, and start deeper conversations. We tend to be very shallow, very quick in these things, and then reconnect, get back, understand, learn more, and shift decision making. I think, and that's what we're trying to do with the Land to Market program now, using food and fiber and fashion and these things as a connector of people to ultimately the farmer and the land that they are stewarding in the process of producing good stuff. So it's a long journey, I think, and we need to, it's a day by day decision. All of us make decisions that are against our deepest beliefs on a daily basis, right? Consumption and things that we do. So continuing to be intentional, like you said, and educating ourselves.
So you think that a really big piece in this is a lack of ecological literacy, and further to that, a lack of agricultural literacy. At the very least, the literacy in agriculture is often placed around industrial agriculture, because that's the prevailing and dominant force across the world in agriculture. And that's quite reasonable to be upset and disturbed and not happy about that. What we've got to probably do a bit more on our side is to show how regenerative agriculture works, do those. And it's hard because, go and do an infographic and see what it costs you. It's, it's, and to do it well, it's because to try and have people understand ecology or understand agricultural ecologies is not something you just click your fingers on. And if you are trying to do that, then it's going to cost a lot in modeling and infographics and all of those sorts of things, isn't it? It's quite a journey.
And that never gets seen enough. So that I think, it can be the role of maybe some market partners on what we're trying to do. If suddenly have a Patagonia or Icebreaker or whatever, tell a story. They have amazing marketing machines that can compete with the marketing machines of industrial agriculture, and tell those stories.
Yeah, that's it.
In the process of selling something. So it doesn't come from NGOs or government, it takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of outrage to shift public opinion. And groups like, I think their name, what is this Avatars or no? Well, I don't remember now, but some people have this ability to reach out and really create these emotional responses, which is awesome. And now younger people seem to be more enticed to be engaged and to dig a little bit more deeper. And I'm stoked about that. I see a lot of young people even questioning the educational system, which is a system also that doesn't help, because it's more here is what you need to know, and pushes it into their brain, and there's no critical thinking, no inquiry. And now they are starting to say, well, no, I want to know more. And well, what about these? What about that? So to put the resources in a way that they can find it, that people can find it. And, what better way to do it than through the things we purchase or the things we need day in, day out to eat and to, dress ourselves. So that could be a good ally. Yeah. We don't have the resources to put in a documentary, but would be, or in media like a Cowspiracy. But we're doing little bits of media, as you have seen, that highlights the work of the people on the land that are doing amazing things, and highlight the work of the people on the other side, on the market side, supporting those things. And hopefully, little by little, our small contribution, but I think, and the hubs are doing the same thing. So I think, again, scale will happen as a sum of contextual replication of all these efforts, rather than like a big top-down solution.
Yeah, which is a really interesting point in the way that the hubs have been designed, the cellular nature of them, which again is a form of biomimicry in the way that you've done that, which I commend you. It's interesting going back to talking about you've got an organization of 13 people or thereabouts, about the influence that can have. I know that even us, it's just 2 or 3 of us working full time in our organization. Being small and nimble, you can do a lot if you're focused and you have good intent. I think, 13, we'd be able to get a bit done, and you do. With that decision, because we often talk about growth models and no growth models. When you're in the movement development business, which, when you boil it all down, we kind of are, with a very clear intent. How do you keep a lid on not getting any bigger yourselves while still wanting to have the outreach that you want to have? Is that because you've followed this cellular model, a very tight level of pedagogical similarity and all of that, which I think is really smart? But also, the other thing I just wanted to touch on was the complexity of an organization. There's a point at which you're going to lose that, isn't there? And you start to become a bureaucracy in yourselves, and then that's clearly not where you want to go. Yeah, you lose the whole. Yeah.
So I'll start with the last question that you have. So for 7 years now, 8 years now, we've been having conversations with my colleague and partner Trey Cates about the 7-year cycles of things, right? And the importance, and we see the nature of letting things die to feed the soil from which something else will grow. So we said, okay, in 7 years, we better go and get ourselves forward. But we've been very, very intentional about creating disturbance in the organization and within each one of the members of the organization. So we actually now have planned disturbance meetings in our organization, which we look at, are we doing the right thing? Is this money well allocated in these strategies or in these programs, or should we just completely kill that and put all that money into something else, give it to the hubs or give it to producers, or so not falling in love to the point in which just the survival of our organization, our ideas and our projects becomes more important than the cause and what we're here to do. A little bit what has happened with church or big institutions, in which now they move huge amount of resources, but they are all basically directed to sustaining their own institutions rather than creating the impact they want to create in the world. And so we committed early on that cannot happen.
They don't have continual resurrection.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That continual resurrection and of ideas, of people, or of strategies. And for that to happen, we felt we also needed to stay very distributed. And that distribution of ideas, distribution of strategies, distribution of implementation models, and distribution of resources. So the most important thing for us was to become very, very clear what is our role in this network and in this movement. And we have, and this is an ongoing conversation with our hubs and partners, what is the biggest value we bring to this network, and then what is each one of those folks, what is the biggest value they bring. And then we don't need to grow as this central node. We are just one node with specific functions. And the moment that function is not needed anymore, either we recreate ourselves or we die, and it's okay because we have a strong network that will continue to move forward. So it allows us also to be more entrepreneurial and make sure that we're always bringing value if we want to continue to exist, right? Yeah. Because the moment that is not, it's just, we will fold. And so it's been super fascinating to see that happening. And the role we're playing so far is being seen as valuable and informed. It's evolution informed. And so I do believe that we must not become institutionalized. So part of the work we're doing in within Savory per se, headquarters and our team, is to make sure that we continue as individuals and as a team and as a node in the network, we continue to evolve and disturb and disrupt and question and get to the point in which we can live every day with ourselves and what we're doing. I mean, resources are quite scarce and abundant at the same time. So we need to use them properly. I always say that I'm so glad we didn't get a big donation early on, because we became so much more creative and committed to outcomes than we would be otherwise, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, I've seen that from time. There was the Richard Branson Prize out there, the Virgin Prize, which I still don't think has been awarded. It's one of those.
Yes, I know.
It's a carrot.
Maybe soon.
Maybe I think it might be a carrot in the middle of a mountain. Notwithstanding, I mean, it is a very interesting question, that one, and a lot of organisations would say, "Oh, if only I had this $20 million, or if I had that, or I had that." It may not be a blessing, and because it would immediately, it feeds against some of those raw human tendencies, which are difficult for even the most controlled people to avoid.
Yes.
And do you think about that now, that if one of the things I think about is that regenerative agriculture is somewhat on the cusp, and when I wrote in the climate chapter of the Regrarians handbook about Everett Rogers' diffusion of innovation, yes, and how, we're in that bottom little piece at the moment, in the early adopter innovator class of person, and there's a big early majority and late majority out there that everyone would call the mainstream, and getting to them is not that easy. But there's going to be a point, if we look at some of the partners that I think Epic Foods, who you've worked with, I think they've just been bought out. It's the trajectory of those organizations, especially in the United States where the market is so huge. You might start off with a boutique niche product, it gets on a side stand at Whole Foods, and then all of a sudden some behemoth comes along and says, "I'll take you, thank you very much." And where I'm getting to is that I'm concerned about the capacity of the regenerative agriculture movement and producers to deliver if at some point there was a click of the fingers and the narrative actually caught on. How quick and nimble could we be, or could agriculture be? I look at it from the perspective of farms, particularly in the United States, and to an extent in places like Argentina and Brazil. There's a lot of landscape that is without animals, and therefore without the skill of animals. And you can't do regenerative agriculture without livestock. It's just because it's not natural. So when I look at your, is that something that you see as a risk, or have you talked about? Or I know you're running like mad, land to market and doing all sorts of things, which I think are amazing. But it's all to try and feed that. But do you get any sense that we might have that actually happen, that demand phase might jump ahead of our supply ability, our capacity, our capabilities?
Yes. One of the things that concerns me the most, more than our inability to meet demand, is for it to be again void of meaning from a consumer point of view.
Yeah.
But the consumer doesn't know what they are asking really. They say regenerative and they, but they don't have time to go deep enough to even understand what that means. And so regenerative now becomes the next sustainable or the next whatever. It still will move things probably in the right direction. But I mean, we're hearing Monsanto talking about regenerative agriculture. We're hearing, these big General Mills and other big ones that are buying smaller, more aligned, philosophically aligned. They are trying to do the right thing, but by design, their structures don't allow them to work in the nuance of the complexity and the diversity and the local and the inefficiencies that comes with that type of agriculture we want to support. So So again, it's like Alan always refers to rearranging chairs in the Titanic, or do we jump in speedboats? And it seems, and Unilever CEO talked about, we cannot be these big monsters that cannot even turn by virtue of shareholders or whatnot. We need to become speedboats and lead, but when they try, they can't.
No.
So what they are doing is buying speedboats, but roping them to the Titanic. So the speedboats cannot go anywhere, right? Even though they may have a long, long rope, they can go and sort of around, but they are still tied to the big Titanic. So that scares the heck out of me, because at the end of the day, if we create a truly non-distributed model, it won't be resilient. It'll be, again, well, I need more volume, and then you start compromising, and eventually you move away. So on one side, I would love to see the demand side be very transparent and very committed and very educated, and so we're engaging in a lot of that in education of those pieces. So at least within the Titanic, there's some level of understanding of what is happening. But then I would love to see the other bottleneck that I see is what you mentioned is the skill, the capacity building, the traditions that are being lost in land management. I see my poor country following like crazy the United States, but 20 years behind, and now being so excited about feedlot beef. And I'm saying, are we crazy, right? And the feedlot people are within the government promoting policy, and the consumer, it's like, really? I mean, is it better if it's feedlot? Because we're sort of like, we've been forever a people that I was raised on grass-fed beef. There was nothing else, right? And so now somehow they are convinced that maybe feedlot beef is more tender, tastes better, and we're following, but it's just the few that are moving that.
Which is crazy, given the brand of Uruguay and Argentina beef was always the flavor of the Pampas.
Exactly. Well, Uruguay has been a little bit more smarter about it, and they're looking at New Zealand as, even though New Zealand has a long way to go, but looking at New Zealand as, okay, that brand of a small country that can be truly regenerative. So Uruguay is that big grasslands, this big ranch here that has the potential to lead all the way. Even we're having conversations with the president and the ministers and all the producer organizations, and they want to keep natural. Uruguay was where they were, Uruguay Natural, and now they are moving into Uruguay Regenerativo, regenerative Uruguay. That is awesome, but I don't see that in Argentina. Argentina, I see just pockets of awareness and amazing leaders there, but overall, we're going so fast in the wrong direction. It's scary. But, and with that, you lose traditions, you lose infrastructure, you lose genetics, you lose, all soil, you lose all kinds of things that will take us long, long time to bring back.
Yeah.
So that I see as a big potential bottleneck to come quickly with enough supply of the type of things that hopefully, if we have an educated consumer, will have demand for.
Yeah, and a consumer. Well, is the consumer going to have to pay more? That's always a question as well. And should they pay more? Is it a value chain problem that we have here as opposed to a production cost? Because producers, by and large, particularly those who are on holistically managed properties, their costs of production are actually comparatively low. And so by the time that product gets to the market, it's the value chain that may well be, taking their pennies and their pounds along the way. But there's the same issue too, I suppose. It's idealistic to expect that a globalized world is not going to be able to have a commodified food chain. That does involve holistically managed production. And so do you think that that it's going to be pricing that changes, or is it the story that changes, or what's going to be the little, you probably don't have the answer because none of us have made it happen yet. But
that's right. I don't think anybody does. But
what's the narrative, or what is it that's going to turn people and make the consumer? Because I know that in the US there's 126 consumers to every individual full-time farmer. It's an incredible power that they wield.
Yeah. And you're right. And again, it's the policies, current policies of subsidies and such, subsidies to fuels and to crops and things that make food cheap. And it's not cheap, it's cheaper or more expensive. Food should be, because we're okay eating crap and paying little for that, but then paying huge amount of health care because we're sick. You know, we're not putting those two together. And when we would spend a little bit more money in better nutrition, we would be avoiding other costs associated with our malnutrition. And the cost, the trillions of dollars worldwide that it costs, just environmental malfunction and resource mismanagement. So if we were looking at allocation of resources, again, it's not a matter of, to me, of the ability to afford food and to produce it, even, of course, cheaper than we do with all the inputs of industrial agriculture that are subsidized. But we know in holistic management, we can increase revenue and we can increase profit and we can cut expenses. So from a farm, at the gate point of view, we can do it. Then we try to enter what my friend Trey refers to as old wineskins. We're trying to put the new wine into old wineskins, and it bursts because the moment we get out, we try to put our artisanal, beautiful, regenerative product into a supply chain that is designed for volume and efficiencies, not for what we're trying to do. And distribution centers, that are far away, and all kinds of things, slaughterhouses that won't make it work, and so all that gets very, very expensive, and that's why we cannot. But still, to me, it's crazy that we can import, like in the United States, import grass-fed beef from Australia, and still it's cheaper than buying it from producers here, because all that processing piece is so expensive, and it's all policy, I think, and design issues. So I like to believe, and I'm not sure if it's possible in this lifetime, but to believe in what Buckminster Fuller said, you just don't try to fix a flawed system, you create a new system that makes the other one obviously obsolete. And if we could, with the model contextual replication, investors start to invest in localized things, and then we'll figure out how we get more to that global piece. But if we can start creating a model that makes more sense for our health, for the health of the planet, for our finances, for the local economies, for all climate, then there's enough money out there that is being wasted every year, right? That can be sort of invested in creating the conditions for that to succeed. It's a matter of political will, and I think then it's a matter of public awareness to lead that policy decision. So
I think that where we're at is that our sector is in the disturbance, to use your what you're doing in your own office from time to time, or on a weekly basis or monthly, I don't know. But to having that planned disturbance, because that's where that's where innovation comes from disturbance, particularly when it's planned and it's gone into with some intent. You will get things out of that, because otherwise you're going into it with chaos as an outcome, as opposed to something that's a bit more, well, the chaos is there, but it's kind of predictable chaos, if there is such a thing. The land to market model that you've developed, or developing, I should say, because it's still pretty new. That's one such innovation, and I think it's. People have been talking about and doing this direct marketing. It's one of the features, you might say, of the value chain within regenerative agriculture, is to have a direct to consumer relationship. Tell us about the differences in the modeling and the intent behind land to market and where that's going. What's your big ambition there?
Yep. So we have, between all the hubs and all their producer networks, we have thousands of producers that want to position and differentiate their product as regenerative. They want to say, what I did, heal the land, heal the climate, did all these great things, and on top it's good for your health. how can I do it? A lot of our producers are sitting in commodity markets and not getting any differentiation whatsoever, not only in price, but in pride, let's say, right? That they are doing.
Yeah.
So they were trying to say, should we use holistic management as a differentiator? On the other side, we had the brands coming to us saying, where do we find these guys that are practicing holistic management and are doing these good things? So we said, well, how do we connect them, and how we connect them with transparency? So the data piece is very important because, as you know, we can say we practice holistic management, but that means a lot of things. It means that you understand all these things, that you plan, that you implement and execute your plan properly, and that the outcomes are there. So all those things, how do we verify them? So because we have that beautiful asset of our network, and that what that means is the hubs are there as a resource for the producers in their network, and there's no agenda for the hub. The only agenda is they are entrepreneurs. They are looking at what are the issues, what are the barriers to be removed. Here is the training and resources that can make you a better farmer if you want them. And then what the hub can do now is go and, together with the farmers, begin measuring the outcomes using this methodology. And those who are trending positive in these indicators of ecosystem health, make it to a roster that now a market partner that wants to access it, instead of, it's easy to find a Will Harris in Georgia because he's an amazing celebrity and such a force of nature, but we have thousands of Will Harrises that are more private and you cannot find. So this is like a phone book of those producers that are doing great things. And with that comes all the data that is tied to their ecological outcomes on the farm, and branding assets and storytelling and education, both for the brand and for their consumer network. Mm-hmm. So it's a way to bring them together. Our original thought was, well, each hub in their own region will have their own brands, producers will have their own brands, and now we'll be able to start differentiating them and create those flywheels that are in each one of these regions. But suddenly we have these big guys saying, hey guys, we want to help you move this program because it's a game changer, so we'll give you money. And they are not regional, they are more global. They are like the General Mills or the, epics of the world now. So we're entering conversations in terms of, okay, so you have a big marketing machine, you can help us tell the story, you can help us create some awareness in the consumer network, but we cannot compromise that, those are the conversations we're having, and we're starting to inform. Fashion, very interested in what we're doing also in terms of insetting, what is called insetting, brands that are wanting in their own algorithms for sustainability after COP21 and the Paris Agreement and the big, pressure for nations and businesses to start curbing emissions. The idea of supply chain as a positive impact on that is not just about changing the light bulbs and the type of paper you use now. By changing the supply chain, I can actually add a positive number to these algorithms and have an impact in that sense as well. So there's a lot of interest for the climate commitments that have been made by these businesses in having data associated with soil carbon sequestration. The beauty of it is that the more producers that come in and we gather all that data, now we have metadata that institutions like Michigan State and other research institutions globally can grab and start studying the correlations and really putting peer-reviewed papers out there that are meaningful and can inform what we're doing, if what we're doing, is good or not, or what can do. So all of that, we hope that will help bring credibility, transparency, honor, place-based, regenerative agriculture, but also tap onto the lever of the power and resources of other big brands that can help move this needle. So
that's interesting. And I had a question here on Facebook here, stories of the world of big finance becoming involved in holistic management, stories of feedback from China and India. I don't know what that exactly means. Maybe Zhao João Pedro Goncalves, if he could follow that question up. But the piece that you just talked about there, where you've got some of the bigger organisations or companies talking to you, it's again that danger of becoming the speedboat attached to the Titanic. Is there somewhat of an inevitability to that, or do you think that, because there are, I mean, I've been approached by, I think, at least 2 organisations, non-profits, who want to set up regenerative certification systems, and they've invited me to give some feedback. And is there a danger that, not with you guys, but well, even with you guys, but with this whole thing, that we're going to have different levels or different organisations here becoming the new certifiers? And is it a strategic step for you to keep land to market as something that, because you have to go through your engagement through the hubs and all of that to be involved with that, really, don't you? So that keeps it true. Is that the strategic part of it? Or?
Well, the differentiation to me is that, and we're talking with some of these organizations that want to create certifications. We have enough certifications. We are not trying to be a certifier. What we're trying to create is a distributed grassroots verification and differentiation program that is really robust in itself. It's not Savory going to check with no meaning, what happens. What the big problem and the big danger is that as we in the NGOs of the world, and especially the ones that have a lot of money, go out to create incentive certifications programs out there, but there's no producer network, we'll end up with all kinds of carbon trading systems and all kinds of certification, but no regenerative product to put on the shelf and not carbon to trade, because we have forgotten that that is in the hands of the producers that need to shift practices for which we need to build capacity. So that is the beauty for us of having the network in charge of doing that, the hub network, working with the producers and making sure that when we go and gather the data, which is what they are doing anyway in the process of managing holistic, they see they're trending negative. There's a learning community there to support shifting that and making it go in the right direction. Because if we don't have enough of these producers doing the right thing and having the right outcomes, no certification program will have a piece of beef or a pound of wool in the market, because what are you certifying? What are you certifying? Practices? They are inauditable. All you can know is that the producers are improving their land. There's some data behind it. It's collected locally. There's not someone from somewhere that doesn't even understand who you are coming to try to see what you're doing. It's really very transparent. All that data will live in a big platform that will have, the ability to, for researchers to play with that. And any partner that is better at doing that than the hub network and the people that are working with us, welcome to play. I think the biggest design differentiator is the network and the ability of the network to touch many of their producers in a way that is contextually relevant, and support that learning and that shift. Without changes on the land, no matter how many amazing trading systems and certifications we have, we won't change the story.
Yeah. So with your programming, you've, as someone who designs programs and has done myself a lot, I look at what your organisation has done with a lot of admiration, and I really like that. That you've done everything so very incrementally, and we've had a lot of our people who've come through us, we've directed over to your organisation and vice versa. Thank you. And I'm interested to know, are you settled? I know you wouldn't be, but are you pretty okay with where the base of the framework of training is at the moment, or is there something in the wind there, or is there something that you're really saying that you need? Because it's because one of the big things that's happened over the last 3 or 5 years has been, just this, the ability for us to have a conversation like we're having now, to have the platforms. We use Workplace. I think you use another workplace like sharing, discussing forum. What's the one that you got? Yeah. So use something like that. There's all of these things which are coming into the space. What do you see as being new innovations in that space, or are we or you're still pretty happy with how the order of things are?
I'm not sure if I totally get the question, Darren.
Well, that's okay. So if we look at if you look at the way that all of your educational programs are structured right now, do you see that with this, we've got that going along, and that seems pretty okay? Yes. How do you see the sort of emerging digital architecture that's out there influencing that? Are you pretty happy with how things are ordered at this point as well in terms of content? Is there new? You added on cropping planning last year or the year before. That's something new. Is there anything more like that in the wind? Do you think?
In the bag that we want? No, I don't think so.
Not that you need to share that with us right now. If you want to. No,
I would love to share everything. No, I think see it more as this big brain that is distributed around the world, including not only our hubs, but our partners like yourself. There's so much learning in our own, day-to-day interactions with the farmers and with new knowledge and new understanding and new technology coming in, and the ability of the digital world to allow us to talk more about those things. There's a lot of groups that I think are convening, and there's a lot of chat and platforms. A lot of those, sometimes to me become then a distraction, because it's just, it's like conferences. There's so many you can go to, there's so many conversations you can have, and there's so much work to get done. So my tendency, I like the idea of new ideas. I think I thrive in the innovation, in the strategy, in the future, in the activation of new ideas, but not for just, program's sake. We cannot do that. But in each one of our initiatives, there's constant evolution because of all those forces of technology and new learning and new things going on. Now, we understand, for example, for land to market, that a lot of our producers are also, the land to market and the ecological outcome verification is a verification of land, not of product. So a lot of our, like a Will Harris will have some livestock and that eats grass, but then he will have some pigs and chickens that eat grain. So the grain is not produced on the land, it's imported from another farm. So for us to claim that the chicken is truly having a positive impact in ecological outcomes, we need to also go back to the source of the grain that Will buys to feed their chickens to make sure that is LOV. That it's also trending positive. Otherwise, they are importing. A lot of farmers could be importing carbon footprints from other farms. So that is a big thing that we need to tackle. So what we're saying is we won't figure it out here at headquarters at Savory. There's a network of amazing producers and people that know these things, and organizations, other NGOs, people like yourself with a deep knowledge on permaculture and crop biodynamics, I don't know, whatever you want to bring to the table. Those are the people that need to come together and say, okay, how do we facilitate the transition of all those pieces as well to make sure that we can continue to move the needle in the right direction. So that is one thing that is occupying our mind for like second part of 2018 and early 2019. What is the input? We call it the input task force. Because as you evolve a program, you start seeing the gaps in the programs and the flaws in the programs, and you need to address them with new knowledge and new teams and new design. The beautiful thing is now we have so many groups of folks and partners and producer networks that are aligned around the same strategy and around the same understanding of what we're trying to do, that it can happen anywhere. It doesn't need to happen here. We can facilitate it, we can fund some of it, but it can happen in South Africa, it can happen in Australia. Australia is moving ahead super fast. It can happen in other places. So, so I don't see great new things coming out of our bag, but I see more in depth and more insight into the evolution of the programs that we have launched. Our biggest commitment and focus this year is the health of the hub network. It's very important that we understand, so we're working with partners. Again, we have MIT, a group of executives doing their MBA, doing diagnosis of our hub model. You know, what are things working and not working in different contexts, in South America versus Africa versus Europe, because if the hubs are not being successful and self-sustaining in the value they provide to their producer network, then they won't be able to impact their regions as we need them to, in terms of number of acres and people educated and influenced and transformed. So
the hubs in effect are your mothership.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, not our mothership. The hubs. The hubs are the ones that implement the work on the land for us to achieve our mission of acres.
Yeah. What I mean by that is that where's the Savory Institute without the hubs? I mean, is that really the biggest part of your DNA and the biggest part of, you know,
right.
Yeah. If you don't have the hubs and you don't have hub health, then you go.
How are we going to impact, you know, the billion hectares that we set up to impact?
Yeah.
And we can go and become a think tank or whatever we want, but that's not.
You're straying away.
Yeah.
So it sounds like to me, well, that's really great that you're going through that review, because that's something that's that constant feedback loop, following your own advice. But also the era of participatory facilitation. I mean, we're engaging in that now. A lot of organizations once upon a time would not have, you know, we could look at each other as competitors, but we could also look at each other as collaborators, as part of the, you know, the team that's got a job to do. And is that what I heard before, that you're really looking forward to doing a lot more of that, because small, nimble teams can't?
Yes.
And we've all got to realise what our own limitations are, and start to say, all right, well, here's Daniela and her crowd over here, and here's this and that, and we can all work together. There's nothing actually stopping us, is there? That's
right. And that is a tricky one, because for some reason Savory always had this reputation of not playing too much with others, or which is not true, Darren, because we're now partnering with, now we're in the process of onboarding 10 more hubs, 40 organizations, and then each one of those organizations can partner. And then we have other partners like Heifer International, the Nature Conservancy, others that were not formally in the hub network, but we're collaborating with. So we do. But I have an analogy that I want to use, that I usually use when they tell me, so do you collaborate? And it's like going to a ball, and you all, are there, and hopefully you're more or less dancing to the same music, but you cannot dance with everybody, right? And at every point in time, your skills, your level of understanding of the dance, or the music or whatever, makes it that you dance with a few, and then another one, and then you cannot dance with everybody, because it's impossible. So
especially with an Argentinian woman, that's going to be a very big challenge.
That's right. Only tango dancers allowed. But really, so I said, it's not that I don't want to collaborate with that amazing organization. Is that at this point in time, what they are doing and their strategy and what they are trying to accomplish doesn't really complement, or we don't synergize. That doesn't mean that we cannot do it next year or the following one.
Yeah.
And others that you want. And sometimes in trying to become more collaborative or super collaborative, organizations go a little bit overboard, and suddenly they become conveners of conversations, but then you spend all your money having conversations with the 500 organizations, but then, and you get all excited because it's super exciting, to see everything. Then you go back home and you have to, reality bites again, and you have to make sure that you implement the things that you're committed to your donors and your funders and your stakeholders. And so there's a that's the dance.
Yeah, that's the dance. I like it.
But whenever there's an opportunity and there's value and there's synergy and it's the right partner to be doing it with, we super welcome that.
Yeah,
it's the only way we're going to get it done.
Yeah, that's great. All right, shifting a little bit, diet. We've talked a little bit about the vegan thing, the plant-based diet thing, which is out there, and that's people's choice. And the narrative that we carry is something similar to what I think you guys do, in that if you're completely comfortable with the ecological consequences of your diet, then by all means. And if it works and nourishes you, well, by all means. The other diets that are out there is because in this space we talk a lot about livestock health, and we talk a lot about, if you look at holistic management, you can say, all right, well, holistic management is, you've got planned grazing, you've got financial planning, you've got land planning, and you've got cropping planning. They're the sort of the big four, if you like. What about diet? What about the self? We have holistic context, which asks the really great questions about that, but is it a part of a conversation at all, or is it just too much and for the holistic managers to the peak holistic management organization on the planet to consider the human whole?
No, I think it is super, super important, and it's an emerging dialogue that has been so in our face in the past few years, with Daphne Miller and the such that are now tying the health of the soil to the health of our gut, to the health of so to me the diet piece is not just, and we will have to get a lot better at that and it doesn't mean that we need to do it, but all of our network needs to become more educated to be, spokespeople for these things, because it's not whether you choose to eat vegetables or meat. What type of vegetables? What type of meat? Well, how is it raised? What is the soils? And so it's less about what you eat, but the whole depth of how those things have been produced and the impact of the soils in which they have been raised and how it impact you and the water you drink and the air you breathe. So it's so deep and complex that, of course, as a doctor, you will never be able to talk, but as in terms of awareness, and that's again where I think public opinion needs to shift, and it only shifts with good information. And so what is the role of not only organizations like ours, but the corporate world and food brands like an Epic or others that are getting in the space to be in the business of taking care of consumer health rather than just shoving off whatever to meet their cravings of sugar or whatnot. But or if here is organic, but it comes from a monocrop of lettuce, or whatever. So I think there is room for us to get into the health space. As you know, Darren, we have brought more and more the expertise to our conferences or our gatherings, and hubs are doing the same. We're engaging a lot of the chefs also as partners in beginning to tell better stories about the food and how the food is and the impact on our health. I'm not sure who are the best ambassadors to be speaking about those things, but then hopefully bringing curriculum or teaching these things as well. And I'm not sure who would be the best to do it, but for sure, if it was led, we would again use the network to disseminate it and
I find it an interesting. I'll use the word omission, from the whole framework, because we do talk about financials, we do talk about land, but we don't talk about the ultimate. Well, the humans are where most of this production goes to. I look at it as being somewhat of a missing piece in all of this, that we do need to have principles. It's a really, grazing methods are polarizing. I don't know that there's anything more polarizing than diets, and whether you guys want to put yourself out on that, put yourself out with that, with that around your neck. It's a difficult one, but I think that we are getting to a place now where we can understand some core principles about diet, because there has been so much, butter was out, butter's back in, fat's out, fat's back in. Meat's out, good meats are back in. There's all of that stuff that we're starting to, I think we're getting into a bit of a settling period in this, where we can kind of say, well, these are some dietary principles, but then we can also have production systems which, like you said before, if you're a chicken producer, where's the grain coming from? How's it being produced? All of that would be things that I'd be probably looking at. But it's, as a management layer within the holistic management framework, I'd find that fairly fascinating to see that unveiled.
Thank you, because we do need to address that. All of us need to address the issue of diet, because at the end of the day, it's like you say, it's the touch point, is the interface between agriculture and human behavior. And if we're trying to affect human behavior, that seems to be obvious. And when I see Meatless Mondays in the schools or things of that sort, it shows, we're forming kids in the process of having these policies and these programs that are informed from a very narrowly defined concept of health. So I think it's paramount that we tackle that. So thank you. There you go. 7 more years for a Savory.
There you go. I just gave you your next. That's all good. Well, it's been a very wide-ranging conversation that we've had here. I don't have any big comments. I'll just read a couple of them from people. This is from Jan Bird, who is in both Mexico and California. And he said, thank you for this, both for this discussion. The holistic management modules I took with Iban Aguirre, pardon, thank you, of the Lives, is that what it's, Lives Savory Institute, Savory Hub in Mexico, are, along with the Regrarians Rex trainings, the best education in earth and social regeneration that I've ever received. I have to sign off now, but we'll be sure to catch the rest on the replay. Wishing you both a great day. So thank you, Jan. Another question here about syntropic agriculture. I don't know if you've heard much about that. Syntropic agriculture is a method that was developed by Ernst Gotch, who I believe is a Swiss national who lives in northern Brazil, and he's developed this very well developed agroforestry system, which gets to a point where it's very syntropic, as pointed out, but it was developed in the wet tropics, so very non-brittle landscapes. And there, Zhao put this point up, saying this because syntropic agriculture is working mostly without non-human animals, in the sense which is that thing. I mean, when we look at the possibilities of having not having animals in agriculture, it's really going to be in the tropical non-brittle environments where that's most possible. You go into the non-brittle environments in the temperates, it's difficult because of the range of foods that can be grown there. But in the tropics, it's there. But that's a pretty small amount of the earth. I mean, most of our focus is on the grasslands and the more seasonal rainfall environments of the earth, where livestock have a very, very important part to play.
Role to play, absolutely.
Yeah, in nutrient cycling, etc.
Yep.
So is there anything you wanted to add at all, Daniela,
Well, no, I really thank you, Darren, for your work and for opening the opportunity for me to share with you the work of our network. And it's just, I think it's upon all of us as leaders of organizations, but as consumers, as parents, as to start being more aware of these things and spread the word and make better decisions and talk to each other and point to the gaps and the opportunities. And some days I feel, we're getting there. Some days I think, as humans, but it doesn't matter. We need to do the right thing, and we need to do as much as we can. And so thank you so much for the opportunity to put our word out there through you.
No worries. It's great to have the chat. That's why I designed this as an opportunity, this whole program, our Wednesday mornings, so that I could talk to people like you I don't see Daniela everywhere. So I thought, well, I better give her a try and see if she wants to have a chat, because I know you have a story and it's a great one, and you're doing great things. So we really appreciate the support that you give Regrarians and look forward to that only building. And hopefully, just before we go, if you've got an ambition to get out on the ranch with that hunky husband of yours sometime.
No, yeah, we do get to the land as often as we can. We don't have our ranch anymore. It was sold a few years ago. That took away a little bit of Jim's identity. He's busy with grasslands. He leads the for-profit side of things. So he spends quite a bit of time on the land, on the properties that we manage. And he secured himself here in Boulder 150 acres where he has his little herd of cows and horses. I call it his therapy herd. Yeah. It allows him to go and get dirty here too. So, and probably our next phase will be on the land again. But it's all the stages of life, the seasons of life.
Right. That's right. We all have to do what we have to do. I know that only too well. Well, thank you for you and your husband and Jim and all of the rest of you for doing such a wonderful job. Really appreciate it.
And all your family for doing amazing work that we're so proud to support.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, have a lovely day, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.